Capacity Building Center of Cotton University. I now request Sri Diganta Biswa Sarma sir to continue his lecture on today's topic.
Namaskar. In the last couple of sessions, we did discuss about the psychology as the science of consciousness. And it is in fact the most significant features of transpersonal psychology. It is one of the most significant features of transpersonal psychology is the revolutionary view and definition of psychology put forth by some of its votaries. And one of those votaries is Robert Ornstein, and who wrote that psychology is primarily the science of consciousness. Science of consciousness. He even said its researchers deal with consciousness directly when possible and indirectly through the study of physiology and behavior. So it is directly science of consciousness, even indirectly also through the study of physiology and behavior. Actually, psychology is the science of consciousness, and it is one of the most revolutionary view of the transpersonal psychology, that consciousness is the science, psychology is the science of consciousness. Sri Aurobindo also said that psychology is the science of consciousness. But his concept of consciousness is not merely our surface consciousness. When Sri Aurobindo says about psychology as the science of consciousness, he does not mean the surface consciousness. Then what it is? According to Sri Aurobindo, consciousness is a reality which will be thoroughly discussed in due course of time. But according to Sri Aurobindo, consciousness is a reality behind, above, and below the surface consciousness. A reality behind, above, and below the surface consciousness. It has different ranges. There is range below, there is range above, even there is range behind. So it is not merely surface consciousness. And it is similar to gradations of color and of sound. It is such kind of consciousness which is similar to the gradations of color or of sounds, because it has various ranges. It has various ranges. But in Western psychology, the clearest expression of this conception means consciousness having various ranges like that of colors and sounds. A clearest expression of this concept in Western psychology, where we can found, it is to be found in Ken Wilber, one of the most renowned transpersonal psychologist, Ken Wilber. What he says? As Sri Aurobindo has said that consciousness is a reality above, behind, and below the surface consciousness having various ranges. Likewise, Wilber also said that human personality is a multi-level manifestation. He has talked about spectrum of consciousness. Spectrum of consciousness, what it is? It is a multi-level manifestation. Multi-level manifestation or expression. You can call it expression as well as manifestation, but of a single consciousness. Consciousness is one and single. It has only various manifestation, multi-dimensional manifestation. It will be discussed thoroughly. But here the point is that the clearest concept of Sri Aurobindo's concept of consciousness is to be found in European psychology in Wilber's theory. who said that human personality is a multi-level manifestation. Unlike Freud says only about consciousness and unconscious. But Wilber says human personality is a multi-level manifestation or expression of a single consciousness. Single consciousness. As it is multi-level, each level of spectrum, it is like a spectrum. Spectrum means mane Ramdhenur potir dore. And each level of the spectrum is marked by a different and easily recognized sense of individual identity. So each range has an easily recognized sense of individual identity. And from what to what? From cosmic consciousness. From cosmic consciousness. So one of the range is cosmic consciousness. From cosmic consciousness to the drastically narrowed sense of identity associated with egoistic consciousness. So highest consciousness is the cosmic consciousness. And the lowest is egoistic consciousness. Each level is marked by a different and easily recognized sense of individual identity. Our range is marked by egoistic consciousness. And what it is, according to Wilber, it is drastically narrowed sense of identity. It is undoubtedly our identity. Egoistic consciousness means separative consciousness. I am separated from the world. I do not feel unity with the whole cosmos. But when you will raise your consciousness to the level of cosmic consciousness, and there is discipline in India, then you will realize unity with everybody, not only everybody, everything of universe, which is called cosmic consciousness. But this multi-dimension is consisting of cosmic consciousness to egoistic consciousness. There are other ranges also, which will be explained in due course of time. And this concept of egoistic consciousness as the drastically narrowed sense of identity, so far as the European psychology is concerned, you will find only in Wilber's theory. It is a revolutionary utterance so far as the European psychology is concerned, that our egoistic consciousness is a drastically, he has used the word drastically narrowed sense of identity. It's a very small consciousness, this our I consciousness, which is in India called Aham Chaitanya. It's a very drastically narrowed sense of identity. But this spectrum is consisting of all such ranges, right from cosmic consciousness to egoistic consciousness. And this egoistic consciousness is drastically narrowed sense of consciousness. So first thing, now West has also begun to say that psychology is the science of consciousness. Even Wilber says, like Sri Aurobindo, that human personality is a multi-level manifestation or expression of a single consciousness. Sri Aurobindo says, Sri Aurobindo's concept of consciousness has various ranges, and he has said multi-level manifestation and expression of a single consciousness. So this multi-level is composed of right from cosmic consciousness. Cosmic consciousness means, we shall be discussing what is cosmic consciousness. Just the opposite of egoistic consciousness. The highest the vast consciousness where if you can attain to that state, you will feel spontaneous unity with everything in the world, everything in the creation, everything in the creation. And the consciousness, what we are right now having, is the drastically narrowed sense of identity. Who says? And Western psychologist has said now. But India has been saying since last 5,000 years. West has only said just few decades ago. And then Dalal says, the Dalal means from whose books I am taking my text. Dalal says, Wilber's view of ego consciousness. Wilber's view of ego consciousness as what? As representing drastically narrowed sense of identity. Drastically narrowed sense of identity. And India says this drastically narrowed sense of identity is the cause of our all unhappiness. There is only one cause of our unhappiness, according to Indian psychology. And it is the drastically narrowed sense of our identity, that is to say, our egoistic consciousness. So, in the words of Dalal, it is in some respect, it is means Wilber's view of ego consciousness as representing drastically narrowed sense of consciousness, drastically narrowed, একেবাৰে সংকীৰ্ণ চৈতন্য, যিটো চৈতন্যৰ মাজত আমি আছো। সেই কাৰণেতো সমাজ সেৱা, ৰাষ্ট্ৰ সেৱা, দেশ সেৱা ইত্যাদিৰ জৰিয়তে তাৰ অন্তৰালৰ উদ্দেশ্য কি? The annihilation of our ego consciousness, which is in some respect a total reversal. It is in some respect, it's a total reversal. Total reversal of what? What modern psychology has hitherto held regarding ego. Igor বিষয়ে বর্তমানলৈকে পশ্চিমৰ মনস্তত্ত্বই যি কথা কৈছিল তাৰ সম্পূৰ্ণ পৰিৱৰ্তন, অলপ চলপ পৰিৱৰ্তন নহয়, it's a drastically, it's a reversal বুলি কৈছে. Reversal means radical sense, radical shift, which is Wilber's view of ego consciousness. And according to Dalal, it is the clearest expression of the concept of consciousness of Sri Aurobindo. So then let us now discuss about what is the hitherto view of ego consciousness in West. How West is viewing ego hitherto. এতিয়ালৈকে পাশ্চাত্যই ইগো কি বুলি ভাবিছিল, including Freud. Dalal says that from the viewpoint of modern psychology in general, from the viewpoint of modern psychology in general and of psychoanalysis in particular. And psychoanalysis means it refers to Freud's great psychoanalysis. So the ego represents the most advanced stage. Ego represents the most advanced stage in the psychological development of an individual. But according to Wilber, it is the drastically narrowed sense of identity. But hitherto, European view of ego consciousness is, it is the most advanced stage. Ego is the most advanced stage in the psychological development of an individual. So that is why Dalal says Wilber's view is a total reversal. So far Western psychology views ego consciousness as a normal and psychological healthy person is deemed to be one who has an adequately developed ego. So if you have an adequately developed ego, then you are said to be psychologically healthy. And not if you are not not having an adequately developed ego, then you will be held as psychologically poor. So a normal and psychologically healthy person is deemed to be one. Who is that person? Who has an adequately developed ego. But Welber's view is a total reversal, that ego is drastically narrowed sense of identity. Then, how Western psychologist treats or deals with this ego, and what happens to you when your ego is ill-developed? What happens to you? European psychology says when the ego is ill-developed, in an individual, what happens to him? That the individual suffers from certain ego deficits. Then, if you are having an ill-developed ego, if ego is ill-developed in you, then you will be suffering from ego deficit. And on the contrary, if you have an adequately developed ego, even then also, there may be sudden breakdown. Sudden breakdown due to what? There may be sudden breakdown in some of the ego functions. Why? Why there may be sudden breakdown in some of ego functions? Due to outer stress or inner conflict. Inner conflict between your instinct and the superego, that is to say, conscience. So when there is a conflict between your demand of your instincts and the conscience and the principles of your conscience, there will arise a conflict. So either outer stress or inner stress. Then what will happen to you? Even if you are having an adequately developed ego, then there may be a breakdown in some of the ego function due to outer stress or inner conflict. And then what will happen to you? You will suffer from, according to European psychology, neurosis or psychosis. So then, what is the culprit? The outer stress or inner conflict. Even if you have an well-developed, adequately developed ego, still there may be sudden breakdown of some of your ego functions due to outer stress as well as inner conflict. Inner conflict between your demand for instincts, your urge for instincts, and the principles or principles of your conscience, which is called superego. Then who is to take the role of a referee? According to European psychology, ego is to take the call. Ego is to take the decision. And therefore, European psychology extols ego. EXTOLS, extols means গুণানুকীর্তন করে ইগোর গুণানুকীর্তন করে। তেওঁলোকে যিকোনো ক্ষেত্ৰতে ইগোটোক ডেভেলপ কৰাৰ কথা কয়, contrary to Indian psychological advice. So therefore, modern psychology, which has hitherto been preoccupied with what is regarded as the normal personality. And what is normal personality according to European psychology? Hitherto. So a normal and psychologically healthy person is deemed to be one who has an adequately developed ego. And that is why European psychology extols ego, and equating a well-developed ego with the state of normality. So according to them, well-developed ego is the sign of your normality and psychological health. If you are egoistically well-developed, then you are then you will be held to be psychologically healthy. And this position you will find, you will surprise, even in Jung also. And who was Jung? Jung, one of the earliest thinkers of transpersonal psychology, and he is very close to Indian teaching. On one hand, he is the protagonist of the transpersonal psychology. On the other hand, he also admits the role of ego. So and who, that is Jung, who was strongly influenced by Eastern thought, even after that also. In his concept of the collective unconscious, he was saying about a collective unconscious. We have already discussed and will be discussed in other occasions too. So in his collective consciousness, what he has said, to speak of something that is transpersonal. Yes, he has spoken something about transpersonal. Did not admit of a state of consciousness in which the ego is transcended or abolished. তথাপিতো তেওঁ transpersonal psychology কথা কৈছে, কিন্তু ego that we can transcend or we can abolish ego or we can substitute ego by something truer individuality. He has not spoken about that. Although he was most influenced by Eastern thought and he is closer to Indian psychology. So to speak of something that is transpersonal did not admit of a state of consciousness in which ego is transcended or abolished. Why? He categorically asserted that even Jung, who is close to Eastern thought, even he also categorically asserted that consciousness is inconceivable without an ego. Even according to Jung, not to speak of Freud and other psychologists, even according to Jung, consciousness is inconceivable without an ego. কৈছে অহং অবিহনে আমি চেতনাৰ আমাৰ চৈতন্য বোধেই নাথাকিব বুলি কৈছে। Inconceivable without an ego. If there is no ego, there is nobody to be conscious of anything. According to whom? According to Jung. And who was Jung? One of the protagonists of transpersonal psychology. Earliest protagonist of transpersonal psychology, and who was very close to Indian psychology, most influenced by Eastern thought. Even he says that if there is no ego, there is nobody to be conscious of anything. So he does not admit of a state of consciousness in which ego is transcended or abolished. Not to speak of others. According to Jung, to lose the ego is to fall into a state of unconsciousness. Contrary to Indian psychology, Indian yoga. Even this is the view on ego, the Western view of ego consciousness. And that is why Dalal says, Wilber's views on ego consciousness is a total reversal when he says that ego is drastically narrowed sense of identity. Drastically narrowed sense of identity is to fall a state of unconsciousness. And when we were discussing the three landmark development of transpersonal psychology, and one of those three landmark changes was that beyond ego and self-actualization, transpersonal psychology was speaking something about something which is beyond ego and self-actualization. So ego or self, the two terms as used in psychology being more or less synonymous. In psychology means Western psychology. It is regarded until now as the most evolved aspect of the human being. The strengthening and development of the ego and the actualization of the highest potential of the self have therefore been considered to be the ultimate goals of mental health and personal growth. But in sharp contrast to this viewpoint, the transpersonal perspective considers the ego to be an illusory product of perceptual distortion and identification. And it conceives of an expansion of identity beyond the ego. Though transpersonal psychology speaks of expansion of identity beyond ego, but it further holds that the disidentification from ego and the discovery of one's own true nature may be considered tantamount to liberation or awakening. But at the same time, they did not abolish the role of ego. What they still held, that a strong, healthy ego can be an asset in meeting the demands of life, or even that it may be a necessary prelude for more advanced work. And Sri Aurobindo also said that the ego was the helper, ego is the bar. But according to Indian psychology, up to a certain point, ego is a helper. But after a certain point, ego is a bar, because ego is a drastically narrowed sense of identity. And why I am asserting all these things, that is to say, the view of Western psychology or European psychology on ego consciousness, because Welber's view on ego consciousness is truly reversal of what modern psychology has hitherto held regarding ego. So then, but why then there is difficulty in conceiving of consciousness without an ego? As Jung says. What Jung says? That according to Jung, to lose the ego is to fall into a state of unconsciousness. He even says that if there is no ego, there is nobody to be conscious of anything. It is inconceivable. Consciousness is inconceivable without an ego. Why? Why? Sri Aurobindo explains. Why? Sri Aurobindo explains the difficulty in conceiving of consciousness without an ego is rooted. Where it is rooted? This difficulty is rooted because we cannot conceive of consciousness without an ego. Ego means that drastically narrowed sense of identity. If there is no ego, there is no consciousness. Why there is difficulty in conceiving? Because that difficulty is rooted. Rooted in what? It is rooted in the very nature of the normal human consciousness. Is rooted in the very normal human consciousness. And what is that very normal human consciousness? It is ego bound. Because the very normal human consciousness is ego bound. আমি যি চেতনাৰ মাজত আমি ডাঙৰ হৈছো, সৰুৰ পৰা যি চেতনাৰ মাজত আমি অভ্যস্ত, এয়া অহঙৰ মাজত আবদ্ধ। ego consciousness. So that difficulty is rooted in the very nature of the normal human consciousness. And what is that? What is the characteristics of that very normal human consciousness? It is ego bound. It is ego bound. But now, Sri Aurobindo says, but yogic experience testifies that, but there is no common yogic laboratory. You must have your own laboratory. This is the difference between scientific experiment and the yogic experiment. In yogic experiment, I must have my own specific laboratory. And you have another laboratory of experiment. There can't be a common laboratory for whole humanity. So, but the yogic experience testifies that the ego, Dalal says, that with its sense of a separate individuality is only a shadow of the true individual. Who can testify that ego, not only, Wilber says, ego is a drastically narrowed sense of identity. But what is India's position? The position of Indian psychology, it is a shadow. Sa kebal matra prasaya. It is a shadow of what? Shadow of our true individuality. True individuality. And who can testify? Yogic experience. But this laboratory is specific to you only. Everybody must have his or her own yogic laboratory. It cannot be shared. So the yogic experience testifies that the ego is only a shadow of the true individuality. Ego will be discussed thoroughly. I am just now mentioning only, just suggesting. So there is a true individuality and there is an egoistic individuality. And according to, because we are discussing psychological health, according to Western psychology, when you have an adequately developed ego, you are the one who is said to be psychologically healthy. But in Indian psychology, ego is the culprit of your all unhappiness, all depression. And ego is a shadow of our true individuality. This is another thing. Then, what is our true individuality then? Egoistic consciousness, ego individuality is marked by or characterized by our separateness from the whole world. And true individuality is just the opposite of this separateness. So that is why Sri Aurobindo says the true individuality, says Sri Aurobindo, is characterized by a sense of oneness with the all. As right now we are not in possession of our true individuality, true personality. We are not feeling oneness with whole creation. We are only feeling separateness of our individuality. So the true individuality, says Sri Aurobindo, is characterized by a sense of oneness with the all. But these are matter of experience. But intellectually only we can say up to this much. That what is true individuality? True individuality is characterized by a sense of oneness with all, even with your enemy. Even with your enemy, you will find oneness with your enemy also. As he states, it is from his own writing, that our ego is only a face of the universal being. So what a beautiful definition. He says, ego is a face of universal being. And who is universal being? There is a universal soul. It is face of that soul only. Because whole creation is the expression of the Brahman. And there are three souls. One is transcendental, one is universal, and the other one is individual. This is another three concept we should keep in our mind. There is a transcendental reality, there is an universal reality, there is an individual reality. But these three are all one actually, different manifestation only. So our ego is only a face of the universal being, and has no separate existence. So ego has no separate existence. It's just a shadow. It's just a shadow, a surface movement only. It is not a being. It has no permanent existence. It's a mechanism of nature for certain purpose. Our true individuality is within our heart. That we not within, is behind our heart, in the deepest seat. So our ego is only a face of the universal being and has no separate existence. Our apparent separative individuality is only a surface movement. So there is a true individuality. As against that, there is an egoistic individuality. What is egoistic individuality? Our separative individuality. And what is true individuality? You will feel a sense of oneness with all. And what is ego consciousness? Ego has no real existence. It is only a shadow. It is a surface mechanism, a face of the universal being. So our apparent separative individuality is only a surface movement. It's a movement only. And behind it, our real individuality stretches out to unity with all things. So this is the difference, very, very easy difference. Ego feels separateness. Our true individuality feels unity with all things. Not only with all things in the creation, and upward to oneness with the transcendent divine infinity. Both. So our true individuality feels unity not only with all things in the creation, but also with but oneness also with the transcendent divine infinity. So I think, at least intellectually, what is ego consciousness and what is true individuality, both will be discussed adequately. When we'll be taking up the concept of psychic being in the Sri Aurobindo psychology. Concept of psychic being. And according to Sri Aurobindo, he has coined a term which is called psychic being. Psychic means inner. There is a psychic being within us who is real I. My ego, this separative consciousness is only a shadow of our true individuality, only a face of the universal being, only a surface movement. It does not feel unity with all things. So when we say Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, it is just our intellectual cleverness. We do not feel Kutumbakam with all creation. But even if well-versed pronouncement, despite the well-versed pronouncement, European psychology has not changed itself. Has not changed its view on ego consciousness. despite Welber's revolutionary utterances on ego consciousness as drastically narrowed sense of identity. So Dalal concludes that the model of the spectrum of consciousness, and what is this model of spectrum of consciousness, is nothing but a levels of consciousness other than that of the ego, multidimensional manifestation or expression. So this spectrum of consciousness is nothing but a levels of consciousness other than that of the ego. And according to Welber, this concept means that human personality is a multidimensional manifestation or expression, and there is above cosmic consciousness and below drastically narrowed sense of egoistic consciousness. And according to Welber, it is a core concept of a psychology called perennial psychology. It's a core concept, that multi-level, multi-dimensional manifestation of a single consciousness. The human personality is a multi-level manifestation or expression of a single consciousness, and each level is consisting or is marked by a separate identity from cosmic consciousness to drastically narrowed sense of identity, which is called egoistic consciousness. And this concept is the core concept of the perennial psychology. It is called perennial psychology. But then what is perennial psychology? Perennial psychology is a universal doctrine. Perennial psychology is a universal doctrine. Universal doctrine of what? Regarding the nature of man. Universal doctrine regarding the nature of man, which is common to all metaphysical tradition of the world. Concept of nature of man, which is common to all metaphysical tradition of the world. It is called perennial psychology. And it has been defined by Amazon.com as the perennial psychology gathers insights from Zen, Christianity, Taoism, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, and more to demonstrate that these approaches do indeed overlap. So you will find overlapping of concept according to perennial psychology. So there are something common in all this metaphysical tradition regarding the nature of man. So there is a common ground. There is a common ground. So, and there is a common ground. So, and this common ground is something any serious student of human nature should be familiar with. So all psychologists should be familiar with this common ground. And what is that common ground? Metaphysical tradition of the world, common to all metaphysical tradition of the world on the nature of man. So this common ground, so no serious student of human nature can ignore it. And it is called perennial psychology. And this multi-level dimension of consciousness, right from cosmic consciousness to ego consciousness, is actually a core concept of this perennial psychology. Still, the spectrum of consciousness, even of Welber, yet at the same time, it is the language of the Welber himself. So yet at the same time gives ample consideration. So this spectrum of consciousness, even after he has found that this egoistic consciousness is a drastically narrowed sense of identity, still spectrum of consciousness admits at the same time or gives ample consideration to the insight of such typical Western disciplines. What are those typical Western psychological disciplines? As ego psychology, psychoanalysis, humanistic psychology, Jungian analysis, interpersonal psychology, and the like. So even after this finding, still the position of European psychology on ego consciousness has not changed drastically, has not yet changed. So now let me refer to one thing, and this is Sri Aurobindo says, মই অলপমান অসমীয়াত মই পঢ়ি দিছো, যিখিনি অলপমান বুজি পাইছে তাৰ পিছত মই ইংৰাজীটো পঢ়ি দিম। কৈছে যে সমগ্ৰ ইউৰোপৰ সংস্কৃতি আৰু ভাৰতৰ সংস্কৃতিৰ মাজত পাৰ্থক্য এই মানুহক লৈ আৰু ইগোক লৈ। পাশ্চাত্যৰ সংস্কৃতি এই ইগোৰ ওপৰতে ভিত্তি কৰি গঢ়ি উঠিছে। যদিও ৱেলবেৰৰ দৰে ইমান তেওঁলোকে ফাইণ্ডিং পোৱাৰ পিছতো অহং চৈতন্য সম্বন্ধে পাশ্চাত্যৰ ধাৰণা এতিয়াও পৰিৱৰ্তিত হোৱা নাই। কৈছে জীৱন সম্বন্ধে ইউৰোপীয় যি ধাৰণা তাৰ সৈতে আমি ভাৰতবাসী সম্প্ৰতি খুবেই পৰিচিত হৈছো। কিয় পৰিচিত হৈছো? কাৰণ আমাৰ সাম্প্ৰতিক চিন্তাধাৰা তথা প্ৰয়াস সেই ধাৰণাৰ দ্বাৰা পূৰ্ণৰূপে অধিকৃত নহলেও তাৰ ছায়াৰ দ্বাৰা আচ্ছন্ন হৈছে। আমি নজনাকৈ ইউৰোপীয় সংস্কৃতিৰ দ্বাৰাই নিজৰ জীৱনবোধক পৰিচালিত কৰোঁ। কিয়নো আমি এই ধাৰণাৰ কিয়দংশক পৰিপাক কৰিবলৈ বিচাৰিছো। পৰিপাক মানে আত্মসাৎ কৰিবলৈ বিচাৰিছো, এছিমিলেট কৰিব বিচাৰিছো। আনকি ইয়াৰ ৰূপ তথা ছন্দৰ কিছু অনুকৰণেৰে নিজকে গঢ়ি তুলিবলৈ চেষ্টা কৰিছো। বিশেষকৈ আমাৰ ৰাজনৈতিক, অৰ্থনৈতিক তথা ব্যৱহাৰিক আচৰণ ইয়াৰ দ্বাৰা বিশেষভাৱে নিয়ন্ত্ৰিত কৰিবলৈ বিচাৰিছো। ইউৰোপৰ ধাৰণা বাহ্য ভৌতিক জগতৰ মাজত এক শক্তিৰ বিকাশ হৈছে, আৰু তাৰ মাজত এটা প্ৰাণ আছে, যি প্ৰাণৰ অৰ্থ কেৱল মানুহৰ মাজত কিছু বিচাৰি পোৱা গৈছে। তেওঁলোকৰ মানুহ সম্পৰ্কে ধাৰণা সিমানেই। কিন্তু ভাৰতবৰ্ষই কয় মানুহ কোন? মানুহ শাশ্বত সত্যৰ এটা সনাতন অংশ বুলি কোৱা হয়। কিন্তু একৰ্ডিং টু ইউৰোপিয়ান ফিলচফি, জগতত যি ধৰণে আন বস্তু দেখা গৈছে তেনেকে ইয়াৰ মাজত প্ৰাণো দেখা দিছে, আৰু সেই প্ৰাণৰ ভিতৰত কেৱল মানুহৰ মাজতে অলপ স্পষ্ট অৰ্থ বিচাৰি পোৱা গৈছে। কিন্তু সম্প্ৰতি জড়বিজ্ঞানে একো সমগ্ৰ প্ৰকৃতি অচেতন বুলি কৈছে। তথাপিতো কিন্তু মানুহ সম্পৰ্কে ইউৰোপীয় ধাৰণা এতিয়াও পৰিৱৰ্তন হোৱা নাই। কৈছে সম্প্ৰতি জড়বিজ্ঞানে অচেতন যান্ত্ৰিক প্ৰকৃতিৰ বিৰাট শূন্যতাৰ ওপৰত বিশেষ জোৰ দিলেও মানুহক কেন্দ্ৰ কৰি ইয়াৰ এই যে ধাৰণা তথা মতবাদ গঢ়ি উঠিছে সেয়া পৰিৱৰ্তিত হোৱা নাই। জড় প্ৰকৃতিৰ অচেতন প্ৰবাহৰ মাজত অসাধাৰণ বস্তু এই যে মানুহ, তেওঁৰ জীৱনৰ সমস্ত সাধনা বুদ্ধি তথা বিচাৰ শক্তি আৰু জ্ঞান তথা ভাৱৰ মাজত এক সামঞ্জস্য স্থাপনৰ কাৰ্যকৰী বুদ্ধিৰ শক্তি, সুশোভন সৌন্দৰ্য, সুদৃঢ় উপযোগিতা, প্ৰাণৰ ভোগ তথা তৃপ্তি আৰু অৰ্থনৈতিক স্বাচ্ছন্দ্য লাভৰ দিশেই গতি কৰিছে। ইউৰোপে ইমানেই জানিছে আৰু কৈছে এইবাবেই ব্যক্তিগত অহঙৰ স্বাধীন শক্তি আৰু সমষ্টিগত অহঙৰ সুগঠিত ইচ্ছা, কালেক্টিভ ইগো, এই দুই শক্তিয়েই প্ৰধান প্ৰয়োজনীয় বস্তু। এইবাবে ইউৰোপীয় আদৰ্শই ব্যক্তিগত অহঙক পুষ্ট তথা দৃঢ় কৰি তুলিবলৈ আৰু জাতিগত অহঙক সুনিয়ন্ত্ৰিত তথা কাৰ্যকৰী কৰিবলৈ বিচাৰিছে। ইউৰোপত এই দুই শক্তি পুষ্ট হৈছে, উভয়ে সাধনা তথা সংগ্ৰাম কৰিছে, সময়ে সময়ে আনকি সংযমৰ বাধাও মানা নাই, উদ্দাম হৈ উঠিছে। ইউৰোপৰ ইতিহাসত যি চাঞ্চল্য আৰু যুদ্ধসংকুল বৈচিত্ৰ্যই দেখা দিছে, বহু সময়ত এয়াই তাৰ কাৰণ, আৰু ইয়াৰেই উজ্জ্বল বৰ্ণ বৈচিত্ৰ্যত ইউৰোপৰ কাব্য তথা শিল্পৰ ভাৱসম্ভাৰ সমৃদ্ধ হৈছে। অৰ্থাৎ সমগ্ৰ ইউৰোপৰ সাহিত্য, কাব্য, শিল্প is the expression of the conflict between individual ego and the social ego, collective ego. এই দুই শক্তিয়েই তাতে প্ৰধান প্ৰয়োজনীয় বস্তু। কিন্তু ভাৰতবৰ্ষৰ ধাৰণা তাতকৈ বহু পৃথক। গতিকে আমি এইখিনি কথা আমি ভৱিষ্যতে আকৌ আলোচনা আমি কৰিম, কিন্তু ইয়াৰ পিছত নতুন এটা ধাৰণা আমি ইয়াত আজি এতিয়া আকৌ কৰিব খুজিছো। আন এজন সাইকোলজিষ্ট ইউৰোপৰে আন এজন সাইকোলজিষ্ট, তেওঁৰ নাম ৱেল হুড, আৰু কেনেকৈ শ্ৰী অৰবিন্দৰ কথাৰ লগত আমি তাৰ প্ৰতিধ্বনি দেখা পাওঁ সেইখিনি কথা আমি অলপমান এতিয়া অধ্যয়ন কৰিম। তেওঁ কৈছে যে if psychology is the study of consciousness, the view that consciousness consists of gradation above and below, আমি ইতিমধ্যে আলোচনা কৰিছো, that consciousness has various ranges above, below and behind. Our normal state of ego consciousness would suggest that the study of psychology and knowledge of the self, the view that consciousness consists of gradations above and below our normal state of ego consciousness. Then what it means, it will suggest that the study of psychology and knowledge of the self are intimately related. If psychology is the study of consciousness beyond our ego consciousness, then what is this consciousness? It is nothing but self-knowledge. It's the science of self-knowledge. The study of consciousness is nothing but self-knowledge, a science of self-knowledge. Studying consciousness means self-knowledge only. So the study of psychology and the knowledge of the self, knowledge of oneself, are intimately related and must go hand in hand. If psychology is the science of consciousness, then psychology and the self-knowledge are intimately related, because consciousness beyond our ego consciousness. When psychology is considered as science of consciousness, but this consciousness is not merely our surface consciousness. Because it has its various ranges. So is it not self-knowledge discipline? Because psychology and self-knowledge are intimately related and must go hand in hand. This thought has been well expressed by John Wellwood, W-E-L-W-W-D, Wellwood. And what he says, let us quote, that this new approach needs to be a self-knowledge psychology. This new approach means psychology as the science of consciousness. কি হ'ব লাগিব বুলি কৈছে? This new approach needs to be a self-knowledge psychology based on an inner empiricism. It is his word, the word of Wellwood. Inner empiricism, not the external empiricism. And what is inner empiricism? An investigation, that is to say, an investigation of experience and its deeper nature. An investigation of experience and its deeper nature. Whatever we experience, whatever our nature, there must be a deeper investigation. There must be a deeper investigation into all our experiences. It needs to be based on self-knowledge discipline. What is self-knowledge discipline? He has mentioned about the practice of meditation. Practice of meditation is nothing but a self-knowledge discipline. And he says that every body of knowledge, whether psychology or anything, every body of knowledge is based on a certain discipline. And what is that discipline? Discipline, that is to say, an orderly and precise approach of observing, practicing, and learning. So what is self-knowledge? Self-knowledge is nothing but a discipline. And what is that? That discipline consisting of three things: observing, practicing, and learning. So self-knowledge is precisely an approach consisting of observing, practicing, and learning. Of what? Of experience and its deeper nature, into all our experience and our deeper nature. So a self-knowledge discipline is one in which attention is trained to actively examine the nature of one's experience. So this is the core concept. Investigating into the nature of our own experience. Through what? Through observing, practicing, and learning. আৰু এই বিষয়ে আমি ক'ত আভাস পাওঁ যিটো ৱেল ডুডে কৈছে তাৰ বহু আগত শ্ৰী অৰবিন্দই কৈছে such a view of psychology as a self-knowledge discipline was adumbrated means আভাস আমি মোটামুটিভাৱে কোনে কৈছে শ্ৰী অৰবিন্দই কৈছে by শ্ৰী অৰবিন্দ who spoke of psychological methods of discipline by which man purifies and perfects himself. So psychology is a discipline for purification and perfecting ourselves. The work of psychology. This is the work of psychology. But Sri Aurobindo was aware of European psychology. That is why he cautions that not it is understood in Europe. Psychology, this is the function of psychology, what he has stated here, is not according to the understanding of the psychology as it is understood in Europe, but the deeper practical psychology called in India yoga. And why yoga? According to Sri Aurobindo, yoga is nothing but practical psychology. So if you are asked what is Indian psychology, yoga is our Indian psychology. Yoga is not therapeutic science. Yoga is not a discipline for keeping our health in a robust condition, though there are consequences. Yoga is a psychology, rather practical psychology. Yoga is a self-knowledge discipline. Yoga is a psychology. So that is why Sri Aurobindo says, psychological methods of discipline by which man purifies and perfects himself. This is the work of psychology, but not as it is understood in Europe. But according to what? But according to deeper practical psychology called in India yoga. But according to yoga, which is according to Sri Aurobindo, deeper practical psychology. All Western psychologies are then can be called theoretical psychology. But whereas yoga is the practical psychology, yoga is not about asana and pranayamas. Asana and pranayamas are two minor ways of thousands of means. Amongst thousands of means. There are thousands of means. Sri Aurobindo says all life is yoga. At তেওঁৰ যিটো ইন্টিগ্ৰেল যোগত আসন আৰু প্ৰাণায়াম কৈছে কোনোবাই কৰিলেও there is no problem, নকৰিলেও there is no problem. আমি সেই বিষয়ে আলোচনা কৰিম আসন আৰু প্ৰাণায়ামৰ সিগনিফিকেন্স কিন্তু মডাৰ্ণ এজত আমাক তাতকৈ আমাক পাৱাৰফুল ইনষ্ট্ৰুমেন্টৰ দৰকাৰ আছে কিয় দৰকাৰ আছে আমি যথাসময়ত আলোচনা কৰিম তেনেহলে Sri Aurobindo's greatest relevance to modern psychology quote আছে greatest psychology greatest মানে modern psychology Sri Aurobindoৰ যেটো greatest relevance হল কৈছে in presaging মানে আমি এটা আভাস দিয়া in presaging the emergence of psychology as a science of consciousness. He is the protagonist to call psychology as the science of consciousness and a self-knowledge discipline. Psychology is a science of consciousness, but not merely is the study of surface consciousness. And as a self-knowledge discipline lies perhaps Sri Aurobindo's greatest relevance to modern psychology. And what he said many years ago, let me quote that he was hinting about psychology as the self-knowledge discipline. When we were discussing the error of objectivity, we did discuss this thing. And let me quote that finally the error of objectivity which leads the psychologist to study others from outside instead of seeing his true field of knowledge and laboratory of experiment in himself. So yogic laboratory is in yourself. So seeing his true field of knowledge and laboratory of experiment in himself. Psychology is necessarily a subjective science. Psychology is necessarily a subjective science, and one must proceed in it from the knowledge of oneself to the knowledge of others. Is it not then self-knowledge discipline? Self-knowledge discipline. So, but now you may ask me one thing. How Sri Aurobindo has said all these things? What is his capacities? What is his adhikar? What is his adhikar? Dalal says Sri Aurobindo has, through personal exploration and experiences. Sri Aurobindo has not said anything which he has not experienced in his own laboratory of experiment. And that is why Dalal says Sri Aurobindo has embodied in his yoga such a science of consciousness, which is also a discipline for attaining self-knowledge, and awaits discovery by those who are turning towards the new horizons in psychology. You have to turn yourself to the new horizons in psychology. Then only you will be able to realize all these things. But how? Through personal exploration and experience, mapped out and intimately described a vast terrain of consciousness in its various gradations. And those vast terrain of consciousness as well as unconsciousness, the concept of unconsciousness of European psychology will be taken up from tomorrow. Until then, let me allow to conclude here. If you want to interact, we can interact for a few minutes. Thank you and namaskar to all. If you want to interact, we can interact for a few minutes.
দাদা সুস্মিতা,
Yes.
দাদা এই যোগিক এক্সপিৰিয়েন্সৰ কথা আৰু পিছত ক'ব নেকি?
বহুত কম মইতো এতিয়ালৈকে মই কালিৰ পৰাহে মই মানে আমাৰ যিটো মই ইমান দিন আজি এই 12টা লেকচাৰ, it was basically consisting of it was a discussion till today focusing on the introductory idea of European psychology through the lens of Sri Aurobindo. And now, from tomorrow onwards, I have decided to take up core concept of Indian psychology. But alongside, I will be taking up Western concept as well. So from tomorrow onwards, I shall start taking up consciousness as the concept of consciousness of Sri Aurobindo, as well as concept of unconscious of European psychology. It will be taken up systematically.
ঠিক আছে, thank you.
And after that, and there will be, you will get some glimpse of our psychological parts while I shall be taking up the concept of consciousness of Sri Aurobindo. But those psychological parts will be taken up separately as well. But from tomorrow onwards, I'll be taking concept of consciousness as well as concept of unconsciousness.
ঠিক
আৰু কোনোবাই কিবা সুধিব? So organizer, so Mr. Sarma, I think nobody is willing to interact. So
Yes, sir. As we have reached the end.
Hello.
yes.
আচলতে ইণ্টাৰেক্ট কৰিবলৈ বহুতেই মন, আমি কথাবোৰ শুনি আছো
কওক
নীৰৱ।
কওক হয় কওক কওক কওক
তাৰমানে চেতনাৰ বহুস্তৰীয় মাত্ৰা,
উম,
এই যিটো দিশ আপুনি আজি কথা ক'লে, তাৰ লগত
উম,
মই এটা কথা কওঁ যে ইউৰোপীয় সংস্কৃতিৰ দ্বাৰা আমি এতিয়া নিয়ন্ত্ৰিত হৈ আছো, ক'ব
হয়
নোৱাৰাকৈয়ে।
হয় হয়
ইয়াতে
হয় হয়
অত্যন্ত নিয়ন্ত্ৰিত। কিন্তু
হয়
সমগ্ৰ ইউৰোপৰ যিটো আমাৰ সংস্কৃতিৰ দ্বাৰা আমি সাম্প্ৰতিক ইম্পেক্ট অফ গ্ল'বেলাইজেই হওক বা আন কাৰণেই হওক, কিন্তু ভাৰতীয় যিটো সিদ্ধান্তৰ কথা আপুনি আমাক এলানি বক্তৃতা দিব বা ইতিমধ্যে আপুনি বহুখিনি কথা ক'লে, এই ভাৰতীয় সিদ্ধান্তৰ খিনি আমি যদি সম্পূৰ্ণৰূপে স্প্ৰেড কৰিব পাৰো, তাৰমানে বিকাশ কৰিব পাৰো, যে জড় প্ৰকৃতিৰ মাজেৰেও যে মানুহ সনাতন, আৰু ব্যক্তিগত অহংবোধ আৰু জাতিগত অহংক যদি আমি নিয়ন্ত্ৰণ কৰিব পাৰো, তেনেহলে এই যে মানুহ শাশ্বত সত্যৰ এক সনাতন অংশ, এইটো বৰ সুন্দৰকে হ'ব। মই আশা কৰো যে আপোনাৰ কথাখিনি যদি বাণীবদ্ধ হয়, যদি প্ৰতিটোৱে যদি আমি বিকাশ কৰিব পাৰো আমাৰ ইউটিউবৰ জৰিয়তে, তেনেহলে ভাবো যে এই মঞ্চত থকা সকলৰ উপৰিও বাকী সকলে এই কথাখিনিৰ পৰা উপকৃত
হ'ব
হ'ব।
সেইটো পৰৱৰ্তী সময়ত, এতিয়াতো প্ৰত্যেক দিনাইতো লিংকৰ ৰেকৰ্ডিং বিলাক আপোনালোকক দিছেই,
হয় হয়,
ৰেকৰ্ডিং
তাৰমানে
বিলাক আপোনালোকক
এইটো
দিছেই,
পাইছো।
আৰু যদি সেইটো পৰৱৰ্তী সময়ত আমাৰ উদ্যোক্তাই যদি ইউটিউবত সেইটো আপলোড কৰাৰ সিদ্ধান্ত গ্ৰহণ কৰে, তেওঁলোকৰ
হয়,
ওচৰত আমি এই অনুৰোধ ৰাখিম। কিন্তু
তাৰমানে
কিন্তু
মই এই মুহূৰ্তত মোৰ কিবা আত্মজীৱনী এটা খণ্ড লিখি আছো, ক'ব নোৱাৰাকৈ
হয়,
মই কিন্তু আপোনাৰ দ্বাৰা প্ৰভাৱিত হৈছো এই মুহূৰ্তত। মই
কিন্তু ইয়াৰ
টাইপিং
মাজত
কৰি
মই
আছো,
এটা
শুনি
কথা,
আছো।
মই বাৰু কোনো যোগীৰ কথা নকওঁ, মই অম্বিকাগিৰি ৰায়চৌধুৰীৰ এটা কথাৰ প্ৰতি দৃষ্টি আকৰ্ষণ কৰিব খুজিছো, আৰু সেইটো
হয়,
ভেৰি মাছ it's a core concept of Indian spirituality as well as Indian psychology. The journey has to begin from me, no way out. The journey you cannot start a journey from others. You have to journey from yourself.
হয়, নিজৰ পৰা যাত্ৰা কৰিব লাগিব।
কিন্তু
হয়,
অম্বিকাগিৰিয়ে কৈ গৈছে, জনে জনে হলে ক্লেদা প্ৰসৰণ, গোটেই জগত হব সুবিমল শুদ্ধ।
আচলতে
ৰূপকোঁৱৰে
আদিৰ
যিটো
পৰা
কৈ গৈছে,
হয়,
ৰূপান্তৰেহে মাথো জগত
জগত
ধুনীয়া
ধুনীয়া
কৰে,
কৰে।
ইয়ে মোৰ গায়ত্ৰী মন্ত্ৰ। ৰূপকোঁৱৰে
জ্যোতিপ্ৰসাদ
এই যে হে আৰু মাথো, ৰূপকোঁৱৰৰ বিষয়ে আন একো পঢ়াৰ দৰকাৰ নাই, মাত্ৰ এই এষাৰি বাক্য, but the transformation has to begin from me. I should not concern about what others are doing, because God is mightier than me. He can look after his world more effectively than that of me. What he expects from me to transform myself. I should be, because as I have said, or Sri Aurobindo has said, or Wellgood has said, psychology is the science of self-knowledge. So self-knowledge means I have to begin from my own self. So what others will do, আমি পৃথিৱীত আমাৰ ডাঙৰ সমস্যা হৈছে, আমি ভাল কিবা এটা কথা শুনাৰ লগে লগে আমি আচলতে আমি কসমিক কনচিয়াছনেছৰ দ্বাৰা উদ্বোধিত হোৱা নাই যে আনক সেই বস্তুটো দিব লাগে। আনক দিয়াৰ আটাইতকৈ ইজি ৱে টু হোল বাই ট্ৰেন্সফৰ্মিং ওৱান চেল্ফ, বাই চেঞ্জিং ওৱান চেল্ফ। মই যদি নিজক পৰিৱৰ্তিত কৰিব পাৰো, মই যদি নিজক ৰূপান্তৰিত কৰিব পাৰো, তাৰ দ্বাৰাহে মই আনক প্ৰভাৱিত কৰিব পাৰিম। This is the core concept of Indian psychology, যিটো অম্বিকাগিৰিয়ে একেবাৰে মই বিপ্লৱী মই তাণ্ডৱীত কৈছে, জনে জনে হলে ক্লেদা প্ৰসৰণ, গোটেই জগত হব সুবিমল শুদ্ধ। কিন্তু পৃথিৱীৰ আটাইতকৈ ডাঙৰ সমস্যা হৈছে যে forget about me, whether I will change myself or I will transform myself, it's not important. What is important? You have to change yourself. So we should let us begin journey from ourselves. Thank
দাদা,
you.
তাৰ কাৰণে কি আমাৰ কেতিয়াবা গুৰুৰ প্ৰয়োজন হয় না? Because I
Guru
don't know কি
apna
কৰিম।
guru already it is embodied within you. The highest guru is already within you. He is ready to help you out. The problem is you are not calling him. Sri Krishna is appealing to you. Please call me, please call me. I am there in your heart. So why you are relying, or why you are thinking about the external human guru, when you have the highest reality which is within you. Just try to contact with your inner Godhead. Then I think he will take care of you. He or she will take care of you. Okay?
ঠিক ঠিক।
Yes. আৰু আছে কাৰোবাৰ আমি কিবা আলোচনা কৰিম Sharma we may conclude I think
Okay, sir. As we have reached the end of today's session, I would like to take this opportunity to thank respected resource person Sri Diganta Biswa Sarma sir for conducting this session. Thank you, sir, for your wonderful words of insight. I would also like to thank all the esteemed participants for participating in today's session. Finally, I would like to thank the technical team for making today's session a success. We look forward to the next session. Thank you again. Good night.
thank
Thank
you
you, Animan.
and good night to all thank you
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.